with DX Central. Follow us on Twitter at DX Central.
Welcome to DX101's Top 10 Countries That You Can Try to Hear Tonight on AM radio from North and South America. This is the companion video for our article from the July 2022 edition of the Spectrum Monitor. You can make sure you go to thespectrummonitor.com to get your copy. It's only $3 for the single issue, $24 for a subscription for 12 issues. So make sure you check out thespectrummonitor.com to get your copy. This is the companion video, though, for the article. And we've broken up into 3 segments. Segment 1, if you didn't watch, was our first 3 countries on the list: Cuba, Mexico, and Colombia. So make sure you click on the link up top. If you have not yet gone and checked that video out, you want to make sure that you do that, because we kind of lay the foundation of the context of what we're doing here. Now we're on to part 2. In part 2, we're looking at the rest of our top 10 list, countries numbers 4 through 10. And in part 3 of our video series, our final segment, we're going to throw in a couple of extra countries for you, what we call here in Louisiana a little lagniappe. And we're also going to look in a DX Central YouTube channel exclusive. You're not going to see this in the article or anywhere else in our information here, just right here on this YouTube channel. We're going to talk about a resource that you can use to help you in your search for these and any other countries on AM radio. So you'll make sure that you want to stay tuned for that. But coming up now, it's time for part 2 of our series, DX101, exploring the top 10 countries from North and South America that you can try to hear tonight on AM radio. Countries number 4 through 10, right now. So for the Bahamas, there's actually 2 stations that we have as an option here. I think there's a third one, but it's on a graveyard frequency, so most folks aren't going to have a shot there. You have 2 frequencies, though. 1540 is one option. We're going to listen to them here. That is the option that has the most power. They are a 50 kilowatt station at daytime, so sunset, sunrise, you might have a shot at ZNS1 out of Bahamas. Now, they're right off the coast of Florida, so if you're on the East Coast, this should be a no-brainer for you. You should have no problem hearing ZNS1. For everybody else, it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge for you. I have not heard 1540 yet here in Louisiana, but I did hear the other frequency, ZNS3, on 810 kilohertz. They weren't super strong, but they were there. I was able to line some stuff up. I had a couple other DXers. It was during our live stream, actually. I had a couple of other DXers confirm what I was hearing, did some comparisons to the actual on-air stream for ZNS, and figured out that I was, in fact, hearing 810. And I was actually surprised how widely 810 was being heard by DXers in the United States. So try 810. They're a 10 kilowatt station, but this is 1540. This was around sunset for me in Charleston, which was direct straight shot down, and they still weren't as loud as they usually were when I heard them here, and as loud as you think they should be. So give them a shot. 810 kilohertz for ZNS3, which is out of Freeport. This is ZNS1 out of Nassau.
Tuesday evening, December 29th. Time is 6 o'clock. News is next on the Bahamas Radio Network. This is Bahamas Radio Network.
Now, what you can expect to hear on these stations, it's a lot of times going to be religious, or God and gospel sounding. Sometimes you might hear some music. I actually remember I don't remember which hurricane it was. There was a hurricane that was going through the Bahamas, though, 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. And I was listening to them with when people were doing live call-ins. Both I was listening to their stream while it lasted, And then I could still hear their on-air signal throughout the night during the hurricane. So during hurricane season, they may not power down if they have a storm that's impacting them. So if there is a storm impacting the Bahamas, I don't want that to happen. I hope it doesn't happen. But if it does, tune to 1540. You might have a shot at hearing ZNS1 out of Nassau. This next one on my list here, country number 5, took me forever to hear them. Now, people on the East Coast hear them all the time. Up and down the East Coast, widely heard. When I was in Charleston, super loud. Not so much here in Louisiana, but I still do have one station out of this country that I have heard, and it's thanks to the expanded band that I was able to add to my log, the country of Puerto Rico. So there are a number of stations on the island of Puerto Rico that can be heard pretty widely. I'm going to include a couple of air checks here that I have accumulated over the years of some of those stations that I see quite often being logged in the clubs. Probably for the majority of you, though, the easiest opportunity for you to hear Puerto Rico is going to be on 1660 kilohertz, which is WGIT. When I've heard them in the past, and when I heard them here in Mandeville, it was religious, very fiery preacher in Spanish, or pastor in Spanish. So that was that's how I added Puerto Rico to my logbook here in Louisiana. But there are news stations, there are music stations, there's religious stations, there's the full gamut, just like you have anywhere else in the States. Puerto Rico has the same thing. They're in Spanish. From what I remember, and if I'm incorrect, please correct me in the comments, by the way. Leave a comment for us and let me know. I believe that in the country of Puerto Rico, they don't have to do an English ID at the top of the hour. A station that is located in the United States, when they ID at the top of the hour, they do. They have to, if they're a Spanish station, they still have to ID in English. At least they used to. I don't know if that's even still a thing. But I believe Puerto Rico does not have to abide by that because I've never heard an English ID on a Puerto Rican station. So the first station we're going to listen to here is actually on 580. Again, this is one that's pretty commonly heard by many DXers, especially the folks on the eastern half of the U.S. This is WKAQ in San Juan.
La manera de manejar algún evento adverso que ocurriera.
Pasado segmento fue uno grabado. Está en la estación de análisis y noticias número 1 de Puerto Rico. En tu radio nos escuchas por WKAQ 580 AM San Juan, WKAQ 1420 AM Ponce, WEL 600 AM Mayagüez, en tu smartphone, tablet o Polia y en tu PC por WKAQ580.com. Tu acceso directo a la poderosa redacción digital. Claro, conéctate ahora y accede a contenido exclusivo y mucho más de WKAQ 580. Expertos en análisis y noticias. WKAQ 580, una estación de euforia. Y aún no tienes el app, descárgala ya.
Our next example of a Puerto Rican station is in San Juan as well. This is 680 this time, WAPA.
Esta es la poderosa WPA 680 San Juan, WSO 1260 1300 Mayagüez, WMA 730 Arecibo, WOZ 1580 Aguadilla, WXRF 50 Guayama. La señal más poderosa con lo máximo en noticias.
For our next option here for Puerto Rico, this is actually our final one for the country. This is a station that I heard before I even had SDRs. I was still DXing on my ICOM IC7200 transceiver, as you'll see. This is on 1120 kilohertz, and this goes back to something I tell a lot of DXers. Just because you have a station on a frequency that's dominant, in this case 1120 is dominated by KMOX in St. Louis for most US DXers, doesn't mean there's not something else there. You'll hear KMOX loud and clear, dominating, absolutely owning the frequency. However, there's another station underneath them that's loud enough to be audible, and you can actually tell what you're hearing. And then I took what I was hearing and I ran it up against the live stream from the station that we're going to hear here, WMSW, out of Hatillo, and sure enough, it was an exact match. And we're going to demonstrate that in the video from this air check. This is WMSW 1120.
7516. Big Blue will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds too. Call 800-59.
Falta poco para el Día de los Reyes por llegar. Falta poco por el Día de los Reyes al llegar. Y ahora para improvisar me ponen la niña mía.
That is unmistakable, right? That is, you could hear Camo X dominating the frequency, and then you had that very distinct guitar music and singing underneath them, right? With that very da 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 da, that whole that melody line, right, with the guitar, and then to be able to hear that on a slight delay, go over to the website and hear the exact same thing. Man, that's a great feeling. So that is Radio Once out of Hatillo on 1120. So definitely give them a shot. I think you'll be happy that you did. All right, so that is the country of Puerto Rico as far as examples that we have. Again, we talk more about it in the article. 1660 is a great option for you. To hear Puerto Rico, if none of these options are really there for you. But I thought that one and 1120 are probably some good options. Since 1120 mostly is going to be owned by Camo X, you might have a shot at them kind of sneaking underneath. I've actually been trying to hear them this week as I'm making this video. This week, I've been trying to pick up this station, Radio Once. Instead, I got a station out of Mexico on the Yucatan Peninsula. So I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying to get the MSW back in the log again. Here in Mandeville. So for our next country, though, we're going to be sticking in around the Caribbean. And this is a country that is relatively easy for many on the East Coast. Outside of that, gonna be tougher. I still have not been able to add them to the logbook here in Mandeville. And that is the country of the Dominican Republic. All right, so we're halfway through our list here, and we are now at the country of Dominican Republic. Now, I talk about in the article, 830 HIJB is probably the easiest station for most people to hear out of the Dominican Republic. It's how I grabbed them the first time, and not only in Charleston when I was there, but also when I lived up in the mountains of North Carolina, I heard them. I think I also heard them when I was in Greenville, South Carolina, which is further inland, just outside the mountains. So HIJB on 830 is pretty easy for most folks on the East Coast, at least, to hear. I have not heard them here because I have a station on 830, KGLA, in Norco, Louisiana. Now, this week, as I've been making this video here, this week, KGLA has been off the air. So guess what Lloyd's been doing? He's had his southeast antenna pointing right at Dominican Republic. I mean, pointing right at him. Have had that and just recording. I'm going through and listening at sunrise and at sunset, just trying to see, and top of the hour overnight, see if HIJB pulls through. That's how I actually stumbled across Ecuador, and also a station out of Mexico that I've heard before. But that's how I actually found Ecuador on 830, was doing this. So sometimes you don't get what you want, but you find something new anyway. So this next one here, though, is actually, it's not HIJB because I don't have a good air check of them because, again, I can't really hear them very well here, and I never did record one in Charleston for whatever reason. But this next one is another station that I think some folks have a shot at. We're going back to 680, and that is Radio Zamba. A little hard to hear, the air check here, the ID. You're going to hear some music, some very energetic music, and then you're going to hear a kind of a softer voice, Radio Zamba. So listen for that here on 680. Again, not super easy to hear that air check, but they're there. Radio Zamba. And I've heard them a couple times when I was in Charleston. So East Coast folks especially, go give this one a shot if you want to add another station from Dominican Republic to your log. One of my absolute favorite countries to DX is Ecuador. I've heard 3 stations out of this country lifetime, including the one we're about to hear next. I've heard in both Charleston and here in New Orleans. And I would say it's probably the easiest country to hear, station rather, to hear out of the country of Ecuador. So I mentioned earlier that growing up as a DXer, some of my favorite countries were Latin American countries, and this is one of those. Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, that whole Andean region was especially for me just like, oh, I was fascinated. I loved the pan flute music and things like that. So when I first heard Ecuador on actually this station we're about to hear right now, I was just absolutely blown away, so ecstatic. This station is on 1510 Radio Monumental. Now, a couple of notations about this one. Again, this is another one of those examples where you have a dominant station on frequency. For most folks in the United States, that's 1510 WLAC in Nashville, Tennessee. So again, it kind of clears out that path underneath it for some other stuff to rise up. So for a lot of folks, if you're hearing Spanish audio underneath WLAC, but you throw your antennas, your loops, whatever, pointing down towards South America, you have a shot here. If you're hearing music, they do have a website. We'll try to link that in the video description as well. But another thing about the station that makes it a little easier is they have been known to have an offset that's a little bit off of 1510. We talked a little bit about this in the article. I haven't gone into great detail about it here on the channel or in the article, but offsets are basically, if I'm listening to 1510, you think everyone's transmitter is transmitting on 1510 kilohertz. Not so much. Sometimes you might have a station that's a little bit off, and usually it's pretty close to 1510. Maybe it's a 14 or 1509.991, right? So it's pretty close. The further you get away from that fundamental frequency, though, the easier it is to spot a station. And so if you get a station that's way off, it kind of sticks out. Sometimes you'll get an audible heterodyne on the fundamental frequency because they have this other transmission that's happening off frequency enough to we actually hear that signal kind of working against the other stations that are on the fundamental frequency. And Radio Monumental is one of those. They're at, I think it's 1510.286 or 29, one of those. They've been known to be kind of around that area there. So we're going to take a listen here, and we're going to hear the audio of the ID. But the thing to note here is, A, you want to pull their web stream up so you can do a parallel. If you are hearing something under WLAC, you're going to want to know if you're hearing them or not. That web stream, they just recently got it back up. It had been off for a while. They just recently got it back up. But also look for that offset. I don't know if they still are. I haven't tried listening to them in a couple of weeks here. I don't know if they still are, at the time you're watching this video, still off frequency a bit. But they've been reported around 1510.286. So they're just slightly up from 1510. And then what you can do is, if you have a receiver like an SDR or a portable radio that has sideband, you can put your radio into that upper sideband mode and try to go to that 1510.2 or 1510.28 if you're able to get real precise, and see if that'll help you kind of pull them in a little bit easier. So here it is, Radio Monumental in Ecuador. Okay, so you can actually see here, when I recorded this in January of 2022, their offset, you'll see this little marker right here on the screen. Their offset was reported around 1509.9865. That's where they reported. And you can see this little signal spike right here, this little peak. That was their signal. So as of January of 2022, their offset was at 1509.9865-ish reported. And that's kind of what I had them at. It was like 9861 is what the my software here that I'm using, the Jaguar software for my Perseus STR, that's what it registered. 1509.9861, which is right around. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact. Sometimes these can drift a little bit. You can actually see some transmissions drift. They're offset. It'll go off, and then it comes back. And then it goes off, and it comes back. You'll see that sometimes. But this is Radio Monumental. Again, there are some other options. I just heard 830 recently. There's another one on 870 that I heard when I was in Charleston. I think there's a 700 is another one that's reported, Sucre, Radio Sucre. But this is probably, if you're going to hear Ecuador, probably your easiest option. One more time. All right, so there you go. That's Radio Monumental in Ecuador. Such a great country to hear. It's a huge thrill to add anything in South America to your logbook. But Ecuador, for me, was just so special. So definitely give them a shot. Radio Monumental, 1510 kilohertz. For our next country, I actually don't have an air check to share. But it's actually not a difficult country to hear. And that is El Salvador. And the reason why they're not too difficult to hear, it actually comes down to one station, one frequency. That's 1630, Radio Elohim. They are religious, as you might expect. And what makes them easy to hear is, A, there's not a lot on 1630. And I have, when I first heard El Salvador here on 1630, I didn't know who they were. I think they just recently, because they have a station on 1120 with the same format. I think not long before I heard them, they had popped up on 1630. And so I was trying to figure out who they were. So what I was trying to do was use some of the online web STRs to kind of zero beat the location. And so I was going up and down the East Coast. I could still hear them. I was trying to go out west. I could still hear them. Midwest, I could still hear them. Texas, super loud. Florida, nice and loud. Everywhere I went, these online STRs, there they were. Sometimes not too strong, sometimes super strong, but they were there. What I was hearing was there. So when they're in 1630 out of El Salvador, Radio Elohim, give them a shot. Again, I don't have an air check to give you. I haven't been able to get one yet. I'm working on that. You can definitely keep an eye on the playlist, bookmark the playlist, because if I get one, I'm going to add it. So it won't be in this video, but it'll be on the playlist if I do get one. But they're relatively easy to hear. I've just never heard an ID. I've always heard the content. I match it up with the online stream. There they are. I know what I'm listening for. I know what I'm hearing. Boom. There's El Salvador. But I just haven't heard an ID to be able to grab an air check. I know there are some online on YouTube, some folks who do have IDs of them actually announcing who they are. I haven't gotten one yet. Working on it. But 1630, Radio Elohim, that can give you number 8 on our list, El Salvador. Relatively easy to hear. Our next country we're going to go to, I do have an air check for. And there's going to be some folks who kind of look at this little, like, why is this one so low? This one should be higher. It's a little bit easier to hear. Because at one time it was super easy to hear over pretty much all of North America, South America, and beyond. That's Netherlands Antilles, Bonaire, thanks to one station, PJB, Trans World Radio on 800 kilohertz. There's really one station we're talking about here. It's 800 kilohertz, PJB, Trans World Radio. They have a famous, it's like 400 kilowatt radio station transmitter. It's huge. And it does, for the most part, blanket a good bit of North America. However, I just don't feel like they're as widely heard as they used to be. Maybe it's because everyone's kind of heard them, so they're not really trying to hear them. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you here. Whenever I've tried to hear them, in Charleston, when I lived in Charleston, I could sometimes pick them up, sometimes I couldn't. And again, I was in Charleston where I had a direct line of sight shot, nothing but me and saltwater between them. Here in Mandeville, I haven't been able to. Actually, I did. I lied. I did pull them in once. I have a local in 800, so I had to phase them out, but I was able to pull in PJB here in Mandeville. So they can be heard. They're just, I don't feel like they're as easy as they used to be. Even with their big new transmitter that they have, super high-powered transmitter, I feel like they're throwing most of that down south or not towards North America necessarily. So if you're on the East Coast, the eastern half of the U.S. or southern U.S., you should absolutely be able to hear this one. But I don't feel like the folks outside of that area are going to be able to hear it as much as they used to. I don't think they throw their signal up our direction like they used to. So that's why this one's down at number 9 on my list, because a lot of you can hear this one, but probably not as many as used to. So we're going to listen to an air check that I got when I was in Charleston. This is 800 PJB from Bonaire, Netherlands Antilles.
If you want to contact the Salvation Army by mail, write directly to Words of Light, Post Office Box 7
Okay, so right there at the end, you heard TWR, but there's another Trans World Radio TWR earlier in there, but that last little bit was the easiest one to hear. You can hear now, this was on the beach in Charleston with you can kind of read on the description here. I was pointing southwest, so a little bit away from, in all fairness, a little bit away from Bonaire, Netherlands Antilles, but also not too far off from them. So pretty much nothing but me and saltwater and them. And you can hear they weren't super loud. So a lot of you hear this one? Yes. Will as many hear it as probably should or used to? No. So that's why they've slipped to number 9 on my list. They're just not as easy to hear as they used to be. I remember in the 90s, a little tiny little portable radio in my kitchen, tuning to 800. Boom. Wall-to-wall signal. Now, maybe not as easy. So for our last station on the list of top 10, again, we're going to throw a couple of extras at you. But for our last station on the top 10, we're going to Central America, and one of my absolute favorite stations to tune in. I love this station in particular. We mentioned a couple in the article, but there's one station in particular from this country, and that is the country of Nicaragua that I absolutely love to hear. And that is La Nueva Radio Ya on 600 kilohertz. This is one, there's 2 stations that I really kind of recommend for Nicaragua. We're going to listen to probably my favorite one, which is La Nueva Radio Ya, which is on 600 kilohertz, and I'm going to talk a bit about that. I talk in the article about Radio Corporacion on 540, which is actually probably, this is why they're on the top 10 of the list, is that one station. They're another one of those that has an easy offset. It's just under 540. It's 539 dot something. I forget the exact number. But they're very easy to spot. It's like 539.86 or something like that. It's way off, easy to spot. You can sometimes hear audio out of it as well. So that's on Radio Corporation. That's why Nicaragua is on the list. Otherwise, they'd be one of the extras. But this particular one you're going to hear, I think a lot of you in the East Coast, and especially in the southern U.S., you've got a shot here. I didn't think I was going to be able to hear this one because in Charleston I had Cuba, Radio Rebelde, can't get through that. Here in Mandeville, I've got a local station on 600 in New Orleans, can't get through that. Well, one night they were off the air. They weren't there. at the top of the hour for a while. So I heard them. So we're going to actually hear 2 air checks here from La Nueva Radio Ya. And I'm going to point out some things that can help make it a little easier for you to actually hear them based on some things that they actually use in their station arsenal of sound effects.
Adelante, muchachos, con la cabina se informa todo lo que pasa. Tu nueva radio ya te lo dice. Tu nueva radio ya. Y las noticias habladas de los nicaragüenses.
Okay, so really quick, that little beep, 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 beep. I've heard that a lot on this station. And I've gone back and since I heard them here in Louisiana, I've gone back several nights and they're always there. They're just always there. Now, again, I've got a really good look at Central America here in the Gulf Coast region. So if you're in Florida, the Gulf Coast area, southern United States, Texas even, and, you know, a little bit inland from some of those areas, this is one you got to try. They're a lot of fun to listen to. They're one of my favorite stations. But what can help you is that little beep, 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 beep. They do that a lot. And this next clip, we're going to hear something that they do a lot that is super easy to make a copy of this one. This is the air check, the first time I heard them here in Mandeville.
6941.
So what you're hearing here first is the station here in New Orleans. They were on the air, and then they just disappeared. And Nicaragua came up.
6941. That's 831. 6941. You're listening to AM 600 WDOG, New Orleans and the Gulf South. FM 107.9, New Orleans.
That little music that you hear, that's not local. That's Nicaragua. That's another one of those little clues. When you hear that, you know you got Nicaragua. And it actually does cut through pretty well. Let me go back and rewind that again so you can hear it. There's the other thing that they do. During their noticias, their news stories, I think they do it during their deportes. I think they do it during there as well, but I know they do it during the news. In between their little stories, they have this little laser sound effects. It sticks out like a sore thumb. When WBOB in Jacksonville, Texas was having their DX test here not long ago, a couple months ago, I was doing a live stream. I kept saying in the chat, I was like, there's Nicaragua again. There's Nicaragua again, because I just kept hearing this little laser sound effect over and over and over throughout the night in between their news stories. Back again. That's the other. It's the laser. And then that one right there, I kind of call it like, it sounds like water almost. It almost kind of sounds like that. Those are the ones that are super easy to hear.
Noticias internacionales. Anciano muere en incendio de edificio de apartamentos del Bronx en Nueva York, Estados Unidos. Esta es la información. Escúchela a partir de las 5:30 de la mañana en el noticiero de primer lugar, Noticiero Ya. Formato 2. Dos super éxitos en la super líder mundial. Nueva Radio Ya. Verónica Giles Montiel está escuchando en León, en la ciudad universitaria, allá en Suchiaba. Y aquí están estas dos canciones.
All right, so there is that's a great air check for them. Again, my local WVOG just disappeared. Dead air. They had their ID at the top of the hour, and then I don't know if they're rejoin on their network or whatever content they were supposed to be going to. If the fader was down on the board, it's happened to me before when I was in radio. I don't know. Whatever it was just dead air. Maybe they went off air. This was around 3 o'clock in the morning. So it wasn't them going like a pattern change or dropping or anything like that. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. There was no reason why they should be suddenly off the air unless someone was like, oh, wow, we shouldn't be on the air right now, and then like turn it off or whatever. But that's pretty unlikely at 3 o'clock in the morning. So, yeah, they're an easy station for a lot of folks in the Gulf South area, Florida, to be able to hear La Nueva. I know some folks actually in Europe have actually even heard Nicaragua on this station as well. So now you know some things to listen for. The little laser sounds, the little water sounds in between the news stories, and that little music that they do coming into and out of their news broadcasts or their news stories. And then the voice, the guy, the La Nueva on the radio, yeah, that guy. It's the same voice every time. So get that voice in your head, and if you hear him, you got it. It's one of those little things. You get to where you hear some of these stations. The station I heard on 830 out of Ecuador recently, I got to where I can now tell you just by listening. Even if I don't hear them ID, if I hear that guy's voice on 830, I'm like, that's Ecuador, because you get to know their voice when they have that station imaging voiceover person. You just get to know it, and there it is. So that's our top 10. Our top 10 countries that you can try to hear tonight on AM radio. I promised you some extras, so let's now throw in some extra countries that you can try for as well. And let's start with a country that is another one of those favorites of mine to try to tune in. And when I did hear them, it was a tremendous thrill. And they remain to this day probably my all-time favorite DX catch I've ever gotten. That's the country of Peru. And that concludes our look at the top 10 countries from North and South America that you should be trying to hear tonight on AM radio. Hopefully you found that list to be helpful, but we're not done. We've got more. We have a handful of countries you can try for beyond our top 10 list. So make sure you click on the link above to go to part 3 of our video series and check those out. And in that same video, we're also going to give you a DX Central YouTube channel exclusive. You're going to see a tool that you can use to help you find those countries and a whole bunch of others to add to your logbook on AMDX. So make sure you click on that link and go check out our third part of our video, our final part of this video series here on DX Central. As always, my friends, we hopefully have helped provide you some helpful information here and something that you found useful. If so, we'd love it if you give us a click on the like button and leave us a comment. Don't forget also to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you can be notified when new videos are available. From all of us here at DX Central, as always, my friends, 73 Best of DX. Now, let's go hit the bands.